I'm here because of a lot of things, lots of concerns about our current government administration and all the things that are going on. You know, not a fan of a war where American citizens are being killed, American military personnel injured, killed. After what happened in Minnesota with two, people rightfully exercising their right to protest, killed in the streets, all the things. It's just very disheartening.
Welcome back to Searchlight Report, a podcast from South Dakota Searchlight. I'm Megan O'Brien, and our podcast brings you up to date on policy and politics in the Mount Rushmore state. As lawmakers gained some distance from this year's legislative session, one Sioux Falls representative spoke about a subject that he says his fellow lawmakers quickly forgot. Also, if you haven't registered to vote in South Dakota, you'll need to bring documentation to prove your citizenship due to a new law. All that and more coming up after we look at a protest against the Trump administration in South Dakota's capital city. You just heard from Becky Monson. She's one of about 200 people who showed up on one of Pierre, South Dakota's main roadways this past Saturday. Ralliers held signs with phrases like "Dump Trump" and "No Kings" since 1776. It was one of a dozen protests held across the state, from Sioux Falls to Spearfish.
It shows you that people are tired of the chaos that's happening. Policies are at the whim of one man, and, gas prices going up, food prices going up, fertilizer prices going up for the farmers. I think people are just getting tired of the chaos.
That's Dawson Lewis. He's the chairperson for the Hughes County Democrats. He says cuts to funding for research in the country and attacks on the LGBTQ community are some of his biggest concerns with the Trump administration. Others say recent events like the shooting of 2 American citizens by immigration agents in Minnesota and Trump's war in Iran pushed them to protest, including Becky Monson of Pierre.
I hope that people, our Congress, all of our congressional delegation, people who have power, remember there's checks and balances. We have 3 equal branches of government, and they should use them.
Many on Pierre's main roadway Saturday said they want more people to show up at the ballot box. They hope demonstrations like this one get more people involved. State lawmakers spent weeks this winter addressing legislation about property tax relief and economic development. One representative says the legislature neglected an issue it should be focusing on: rehabilitation for people who are incarcerated, to reduce the number of people who return to prison after their release. South Dakota Searchlight's Mackenzie Huber attended a recent roundtable with lawmakers from the Sioux Falls area who looked back at the session. Republican Representative Brian Mulder spoke with Huber afterward. Mulder said during the roundtable that concerns last year about rehabilitation were quickly forgotten this year. Mulder referenced an ongoing task force on the subject led by Lieutenant Governor Tony Venhuizen. Governor Larry Roden appointed that task force last year. At the time, Roden was convincing lawmakers to approve spending $650 million on a men's prison that will be built in Sioux Falls. Mulder also referenced an $87 million women's prison that's scheduled to open this summer in Rapid City.
Why do you think it was a forgotten topic last year? Can you just expand on that?
Yeah, I think it's tyranny of the urgent from leadership in the House side and the caucus of what they do. And really their priority was property taxes, to get that across the finish line. And so if that wasn't on top of their list, the rest of the Republican caucus on the House side didn't pick it up, and we just didn't have the support to get it done. And so, again, I think I could have pushed a lot harder on it, but I ultimately know a good pathway for this is through the governor's task force on resettlement.
I was going to ask, that's what you said, and what Venhuizen said as well was you've got that task force, they're working. Yeah. It's hopefully going to be a priority again next year. But are there any consequences faced because of not going with it and ignoring it this session?
Yeah, I think the consequences faced are just another year lost, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's just time and what we have, and that we're not going to be able to serve now what I believe is opening up soon. I don't remember all the dates, but the Rapid City Women's Prison, and being able to expand the program out there with that new facility. And I think that's an opportunity that we'll lose. So we'll just lose a little bit of time on that. But again, not all hope is lost, right? I mean, I think there's a pathway for us to continue to move forward on it.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying with the delayed addressing of that. What does that mean for the actual South Dakota, though? I mean, I keep up with the prison system and what that means in rehabilitation, but what does that actually mean to have that delay for a normal South Dakota?
Well, I just think it opens up, unfortunately, when we're not releasing individuals to the best of their potential from our prison, it just puts a strain on our community overall. And Sioux Falls carries the brunt of that, quite frankly, in what takes place. And so that is the reality. And then again, it's just spinning our wheels, costing us more and more dollars. And that's what, even when I spoke about earlier on this panel about efficiencies in healthcare systems that are tightly funded, when we don't fund them properly, we just retread dollars and spend them in unnecessary places because we're not doing it to the best of their ability the first time around.
Sounds good.
Few bills dealing with inmate rehabilitation were introduced during the legislative session. One bill passed that makes it easier for people released from prison to return to their home area rather than remaining in the area the prison is located. It requires the Department of Corrections to transport released people to their home county, the county where they were sentenced, or to a location equivalent in distance to the closer of those two options. Governor Larry Roden signed the bill into law earlier this month. Another bill would have awarded $2.7 million to the State Department of Corrections to expand an existing rehabilitation program within the prison system, but that bill failed. To read more about how state lawmakers approach the rehabilitation topic this year, check out Mackenzie Huber's reporting at SouthDakotaSearchlight.com.
At a time when the federal government is making drastic changes to public policy and pushing so many programs back to the states, it's hard to know what it all means for you, your family, and your community. Our Evening Wrap newsletter from State's Newsroom keeps you up to date on what your elected officials are doing or not doing to manage the fallout. You can sign up by going to statesnewsroom.com/subscribe.
If you're registering to vote in the upcoming election in South Dakota, you'll need to prove that you're a U.S. citizen. Republican Governor Larry Roden signed a bill into law that requires new voters to show proof of citizenship. Acceptable documentation includes a driver's license, tribal ID, passport, or birth certificate. People who are already registered to vote do not need to take any action. State Senator John Carley, a Republican from Piedmont, sponsored the legislation.
When people are currently going in to register to vote, there's a little checkbox that they can check that says, I'm a U.S. citizen, and they check that. But the issue is that's relying on the honor system, and we've had people testify that folks are coming in that are known not U.S. citizens, and yet they just continue to sign that paper saying, I want to register, and are attempting to get to vote.
In 2024, the South Dakota Secretary of State removed 273 people from the voter rolls who were not citizens. They had been registered by human error when they obtained driver's licenses. One of them cast a ballot in the 2016 general election, the office says. The new law could limit people's lawful ability to participate in elections. That's according to Samantha Chapman, the advocacy manager for the American Civil Liberties Union of South Dakota.
So this is going to impact a lot of people who are primarily low income, elderly, younger people who are registering to vote for the first time, who don't have a handy copy of their birth certificate, or who don't have a passport.
If someone fails to document their citizenship, they can still register as a federal voter and cast a ballot for presidential and congressional races. But pending congressional legislation could put the same proof of citizenship requirement on people registering to vote in federal elections. That's known as the SAVE Act. South Dakota's governor also signed a bill into law earlier this year that gives voters the ability to challenge another voter's citizenship. That bill will be in effect for the general election in November. The challenge must be in the form of a signed, sworn statement and must include what state law describes as, quote, documented evidence. Chapman says this could also impact people who want to participate in elections.
Citizenship status isn't something that you can determine just based off of somebody's appearance or their name or the way that their voice sounds. But what these laws do are it's encouraging people to throw these people into question. In some, it just makes it a lot harder and more discouraging for folks to turn out to vote.
Carly says the two new laws are complementary.
I think the average citizen really wants to make sure it's just our citizens that are voting. Those that are paying taxes, those that are, living in America, those that followed the law to become citizens. I think people want that.
Carly also sponsored a law last year that requires South Dakota driver's licenses to show a person's citizenship status. All licenses issued since July 1st last year reflect that. The primary election is June 2nd, and the voter registration deadline for that election is May 18th. Lastly, there's a new name in the South Dakota Hall of Honor at the State Capitol building. Retired U.S. Navy Captain Royce Williams joins 10 other South Dakotans who have been awarded the Medal of Honor, the country's highest military honor. In 1952, Williams led a 3-jet mission against 7 Soviet jets in the only overwater combat between U.S. Navy fighters and Soviet fighters during the Cold War. 2 of his fellow pilots had to return to the carrier with mechanical problems. Williams disabled 3 enemy jets and damaged a 4th. President Donald Trump awarded Williams with the Medal of Honor during this year's State of the Union speech. Williams' actions were classified for more than 50 years due to tensions between the two countries.
But tonight, at 100 years old, this brave Navy captain is finally getting the recognition he deserves. He was a legend long before this evening.
Williams did not attend the ceremony at the state capitol, but I spoke with John Mollison, a Sioux Falls filmmaker who produced a documentary about Williams.
And to be honest with you, when I heard about Royce Williams' action, I didn't know he was a South Dakotan. And so the idea of his military action alone sparked my interest just to make a film on it. But I found that when I would talk to him about his South Dakota upbringing, he really sparked and thought that was just great. He was, geez, nobody knows that. You're from Wilmot. Who knows where Wilmot is, He considers his South Dakota upbringing as part and parcel of who he is. It gave him freedom. It gave him a sense of wonder, of connection to people that he wouldn't have gotten in a big city. So when I started interviewing Royce in, I believe it was 2018, and then I also filmed him in 2019, and I did a PBS project with him in 2020. We would just kind of talk about his being a South Dakotan and what that meant. And he'd start teasing me, the weather, how's it going, and how much snow you got, and did you make it to the grocery store? Those types of teasing. But Royce has a life of values. He didn't get the Medal of Honor simply for one moment in time. He has so much support for the Medal of Honor. It's because of the values that he represents. He's authentic, and he has a sense of pragmatism, a sense of simplicity, definitely humility, but absolute courage, and doesn't follow the norm. He does what he thinks is right, and that he credits to his upbringing here in this state. And we have something special in South Dakota. It's small, we all know each other. It gives us a little bit of humility because we know we can't get away with much. We got to toe our line, we got to do our own good job. And Royce respects that. That's part of his life too.
And focusing on Royce, those moments on November 18th obviously pushed him to get this recognition in the first place. What went down that day? Well,
if you really want to talk about November 18th, that's a that's an interesting, it's an interesting moment. Essentially, he's in a dogfight with 7 MiGs, MiG fighter planes, and they're flown by highly trained, intelligent fighter pilots. He is a highly trained, intelligent fighter pilot. The only difference is he's 1, they're 7. Those bullets are real. They're shooting at each other, not to scare each other. They're shooting at each other to knock the other one down. It's life or death. That's a moment for even the best of us to break down and make a mistake. Royce didn't. He kept his cool. If you talk to Royce about the moment, he considers it, I was just kind of doing my job. I was just thinking, I was focused. I wasn't thinking the odds are against me. I wasn't thinking I could die. What he's thinking is, I need to defend myself. I'm the last guy on the combat air patrol in the air. I have to do my job. And that's why he emerged absolutely triumphant.
And so when people walk into the Capitol, walk past his name on this wall of honor, what do you want them to think about when it comes to Royce?
You go and you read those plaques. The plaques alone are moments that you can stop and say, that's heroism. You can put yourself in that moment and think, what would I do? I've been in Royce's home. I've gotten to know him as a friend. And I can tell you that he's the real thing, straight through to the core. And so when you walk past that moment, if you're wondering if God could ever create people truly to be worthy of, look at him, do that, Royce is that guy. And I believe that Royce Williams is a South Dakotan everyone can be proud of.
Williams grew up in Wilmot, but now lives in California. The plaque honoring him at the state capitol is in the hallway that visitors enter after going through security. That's all we have for this week on Searchlight Report. The podcast is based on reporting by South Dakota Searchlight's staff, editor Seth Tupper, senior reporter John Holt, and reporters Joshua Heyer, Mackenzie Huber, and me. I write the scripts and produce the audio with editing by Seth Tupper. Audio this week came from recordings by South Dakota Searchlight. South Dakota Searchlight is part of States Newsroom, the nation's largest nonprofit news organization. Until next time, I'm South Dakota Searchlight's Megan O'Brien with the Searchlight Report.